I was being controlled physically and mentally abused by my husband, who I thought was very gentle and loving. I was determined to fight to get away from him. I am Janice, and this is the story of how my perfect life unraveled into something unrecognizable. I was 43 years old, a housewife, and a mother to my 7-year-old daughter, Olivia. From the outside, my life seemed picture perfect. A loving husband, a beautiful child, a home that looked straight out of a family magazine. But what people didn't see was the slow, excruciating transformation of the man I had once loved into a stranger who ruled my world with an iron grip. When I first met Caleb, he was everything I had ever wanted in a man. Tall, confident, effortlessly charming. He knew exactly how to make me feel like the most special woman in the room. We locked eyes at a dinner party hosted by a mutual friend, and from that moment on, he was relentless in his pursuit. Flowers at my office, spontaneous weekend getaways, deep midnight conversations that made me believe I had found my soulmate. I still remember the way he would brush a stray strand of hair from my face, his voice dripping with devotion as he whispered, "You're the best thing that ever happened to me, Janice." I believed him. I believed every word. When he proposed, I said yes without hesitation. I had spent my 20s and early 30s climbing the corporate ladder, excelling as an accountant, building a future I was proud of, but love, real, passionate love, was something I had always longed for, and Caleb made me feel like I had finally found it. So when he told me he wanted a traditional marriage where I could stay home, take care of our children, and focus on building a family, I didn't question it. He convinced me that my job was holding me back from the real joy of life. "Let me take care of you, Janice. You don't need to worry about anything anymore," he said, holding my hand across the candlelit dinner table. His voice was warm, reassuring, and so very convincing. I handed in my resignation the next day. At first, everything felt like a dream. I was newly married to a man who showered me with affection, a man who kissed me on the forehead every morning before leaving for work, a man who would pull me into his arms at the end of the day and tell me how lucky he was to have me. But then slowly, almost imperceptibly, things began to shift. It started with small comments casual enough to be dismissed. "That dress is a little tight, don't you think? Maybe you should spend more time tidying up the house. I mean, what else are you doing all day? I don't like how you spoke to me just now. Show some respect, Janice." At first, I laughed them off. Everyone had their quirks, right? Marriage was about compromise. Maybe I was being too sensitive. But then the comments turned into criticisms. "Why can't you cook like my mother did? You have one job, Janice. Why is the house always a mess? You're lucky I put up with you." The man who had once adored me, who had promised to cherish me, now looked at me with disdain. The thoughtful gestures that had once made my heart flutter vanished. No more flowers, no more compliments, no more random kisses on my forehead. Instead, there were expectations, rules, orders. I was no longer his partner, I was his possession. If dinner wasn't ready exactly when he wanted it, his face would darken. If Olivia was being too loud, he would snap, his voice sharp and cutting. If I disagreed with him, even over something small, he would scoff and shake his head like I was an idiot who didn't deserve an opinion. "You're overreacting," he would say whenever I tried to tell him how I felt. "You always blow things out of proportion. Maybe if you weren't so emotional all the time, I wouldn't have to be the bad guy." At some point, I stopped fighting back. It was easier that way. I told myself it was just stress. Caleb's job was demanding. He had a lot on his plate. Maybe if I just tried harder, he would go back to being the man I had fallen in love with. So I did. I cooked the meals he liked. I made sure Olivia never made too much noise when he was home. I kept the house spotless. I swallowed my words, my frustrations, my sadness. But nothing was ever enough. He found new things to criticize. My appearance, my weight, the way I spoke. "God, Janice, do you even hear yourself? No wonder no one takes you seriously." The words were daggers, each one slicing away at the woman I used to be. And then came the financial control. I had no job, no income of my own. Every dollar came from him. "You don't need money," he would say when I asked about setting up a personal account. "What could you possibly need that I'm not already providing?" Every purchase had to be justified. Every expense was scrutinized. If I spent too much on groceries, he would glare at the receipt like I had personally offended him. "Do you think money grows on trees, Janice?" I learned to ask for permission before buying anything, even necessities. And still, I stayed. because leaving felt impossible. Because I had Olivia to think about, because every time I even considered leaving, I wondered if maybe, just maybe, Caleb would change. After all, he wasn't always like this. I held on to the memory of the man he used to be, the man who once made me feel like the most important person in the world, but that man was gone. And the worst part, I didn't even realize just how much of myself I had lost, how much of my life I had surrendered, until it was too late, until the accident, until I was lying in a hospital bed, broken and helpless, until Caleb walked in, looked at me with cold, disgusted eyes, and said the words that shattered whatever hope I had left. Do you have any idea how much of a burden you've become? That was the moment I knew. I wasn't his wife anymore. I was his inconvenience, and I had to get out before I lost everything. The first time Caleb raised his voice at Olivia, I told myself it was just a bad day, a moment of frustration. It had been a long evening and dinner wasn't ready when he walked through the door. I had been helping Olivia with a school project, finger paints and poster boards spread across the dining table, her tiny hands covered in a rainbow of colors. She was giggling, showing me her masterpiece, when Caleb stormed in. His eyes darted to the table, then to the empty stove. "Where's dinner?" His voice was tight, controlled, but I knew that edge. I was helping Olivia with her project I started, wiping my hands on a towel. Before I could even finish, he slammed his briefcase onto the counter. "So you just decided to ignore the one thing you're supposed to do?" I flinched. His tone was sharp, cutting straight through me like a blade. "I'll start cooking now," I said quickly, ushering Olivia to wash her hands. "It's always excuses with you, Janice," he muttered under his breath, shaking his head. That night, I barely ate. My appetite had been replaced by a knot of anxiety twisting in my stomach. But I told myself it was just stress, that he'd been working too hard. I was wrong. Caleb's complaints, once occasional, became relentless. "You don't even try anymore. This house is a disaster. Jesus, Janice, do you even know how to cook?" At first, I fought back. I pointed out all the things I did do, how the laundry was always clean, the floors spotless, Olivia taken care of, dinner cooked 6 out of 7 nights a week. But arguing only made it worse. "Oh, so now you're talking back?" he sneered one night after I told him I was doing my best. "Maybe if you spent less time watching TV and more time being a decent wife, I wouldn't have to correct you all the time." Correct me? Like I was some kind of broken thing that needed fixing? I learned to hold my tongue. The arguments drained me, left me exhausted. I started anticipating his moods, making sure dinner was on the table before he got home, that Olivia was quiet, that the house was spotless, but no matter how much effort I put in, it was never enough. The insults came faster, sharper. "You're useless. I should have married someone who actually knew how to be a wife. I don't know why I even put up with you." At some point, I stopped arguing. I stopped reacting. And that's when he knew he had won. One evening, Olivia accidentally spilled her juice on the kitchen floor. She looked up at me, her little hands frozen mid-air, eyes wide with fear. Before I could even tell her it was okay, Caleb stepped into the room. His face darkened the second he saw the mess. "Are you kidding me?" His voice was low, dangerous. Olivia shrank back. "She's just a kid, Caleb," I said quickly, stepping between them. His glare snapped to me, jaw tight. "Maybe if you actually disciplined her, she wouldn't be such a spoiled little brat." The words stung. My heart pounded in my chest, my body tensing as I held Olivia close. "She's not a brat," I said through clenched teeth. "Oh, so now you're questioning me too?" he shot back. "No wonder she's like this. Look at the example you set." I should have walked away. I should have grabbed Olivia and left the room. But I stood there stunned as Caleb turned his back and stormed off. That night, I laid in bed staring at the ceiling, Olivia curled up beside me because she was too scared to sleep in her own room, and that's when the fear settled deep inside me. He wasn't just taking his anger out on me anymore, he was turning it on Olivia. I started withdrawing without even realizing it. At first, I made excuses when friends invited me out. "Oh, I'm too busy, Caleb's been stressed, maybe next time." Then I stopped answering calls altogether. My parents, Teresa and Douglas, noticed. "Janice, honey, is everything okay?" my mom asked one afternoon. "Yeah, of course," I said, forcing a smile. "Just busy with Olivia, you know how it is." She didn't believe me. I could hear it in her voice. "You don't sound like yourself." But what could I say? That the man they had once welcomed into our family had turned into someone I barely recognized? That I felt trapped? That the person I had trusted with my heart now used that trust against me every single day? So I lied. "I'm fine, Mom, really?" The more I pulled away, the easier it became to pretend. Pretend I wasn't hurting. Pretend I wasn't afraid. Pretend that Caleb's words weren't carving into me, leaving wounds no one could see. Because if I admitted the truth, what then? Where would I go? I had no job, no money of my own. Caleb had made sure of that, and worst of all, he had made me believe that I couldn't survive without him, that I was nothing without him. One night, Caleb came home late. His tie was loose, his expression unreadable. I knew better than to ask where he had been. I was sitting at the kitchen table, Olivia already in bed. I had waited up, hoping, stupidly, that maybe he'd sit down with me, talk to me like we used to. Instead, he walked past me and grabbed a beer from the fridge. "Aren't you even going to say hello?" I asked softly. He let out a cold laugh. "Jesus, Janice, are you that desperate for attention?" I flinched. I hesitated. "I feel like we haven't really talked lately." He took a slow sip, then leaned against the counter. "Maybe because there's nothing to talk about." My throat tightened. "What happened to us, Caleb?" I whispered. He looked at me, then really looked at me, and for a split second, I thought I saw something in his eyes. Regret? Maybe? Sadness? But then it was gone. He shook his head. "You happened, Janice. You let yourself go. You got boring." The words hit me harder than any slap ever could. He turned and walked away, leaving me sitting there, hands trembling, heart pounding. I wanted to scream. I wanted to break something, but most of all, I wanted to disappear. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering how the hell I had let myself get here, how I had let Caleb strip me down to nothing, and for the first time, a new thought crept into my mind. Maybe it wasn't me who had failed. Maybe it was him. But I was too afraid to leave, too afraid of what he'd do, so I stayed. For Olivia. For the hope that maybe, just maybe, things would get better. But deep down, I already knew the truth. Things weren't getting better, they were getting worse. And the moment that car hit me, the moment I woke up in that hospital bed, was when I finally understood. Caleb never loved me. Not really. I was never his wife, I was his prisoner. And I had to find a way to escape before it was too late. I still remember the way the sky looked that evening, heavy dark clouds swallowing the last of the daylight like a warning I chose to ignore. My arms ached from carrying grocery bags and my mind buzzed with mundane thoughts, what to cook for Olivia, what errands needed running tomorrow. But then, as if fate itself had conspired against me, headlights sliced through the shadows, tires screeched, a violent sound shattering my peace. Before I could react, the car slammed into me and darkness surged forward, claiming me instantly. When consciousness finally returned, I found myself trapped, bound by the sterile whiteness of hospital sheets, my body a landscape of pain. Both legs imprisoned in casts, tubes and monitors connected to me like lifelines. Every movement sparked agony, but worse than physical suffering was the haunting question, where was Caleb? Teresa and Douglas hovered by my bedside day and night, their faces etched with worry. They took shifts caring for Olivia, shielding her from the harsh reality. Yet each day, Caleb's absence gnawed deeper into my heart. 1 week passed, then 2, silence, until at the end of the 3rd week, the door finally creaked open and there he stood. But the relief I felt was swiftly replaced by confusion. His expression was not of concern or guilt, but twisted into a mask of raw, seething resentment. Caleb stepped closer, his voice low, cold, devoid of any affection. "Do you know how much trouble you've caused me?" he spat, his words a slap to my already battered spirit. I stared at him, incredulous, struggling to understand. "Caleb, I've been in an accident," I whispered weakly, hoping logic might break through his rage. "I almost died." "Oh, I know," he sneered, eyes narrowed, devoid of sympathy. "But do you think I have time for this? To nurse you back to health? To deal with hospital bills? Sell your jewelry? Figure it out." Shock surged through me, disbelief mingling painfully with a dawning realization. Had I ever truly known the man standing before me? "How can you say that?" My voice trembled, cracking beneath the weight of betrayal. "I'm your wife," he laughed bitterly, cruelly. "Wife, you're nothing but a burden. You've always been a burden." A storm of anguish and humiliation rose within me, and though my body lay broken, a spark of defiance ignited deep inside. "You're selfish, Caleb," I choked out, tears stinging my eyes, blurring the harsh lines of his face. "You've never loved anyone but yourself." It was as if my words flipped a switch inside him. Rage erupted violently across his features, turning him from familiar stranger to terrifying monster. With a guttural cry, Caleb lunged forward, his hands gripping my shoulders, pinning me painfully against the bed. I tried to scream, panic flaring wildly, but my breath came shallow, desperate. "Shut your mouth," he hissed, pressing closer, eyes wild, dangerous. "You have no idea what I'm capable of." Fear surged through every nerve ending, pure and primal, as I struggled against him, helpless beneath his strength. The monitors beside me beeped urgently, their alarms echoing my silent plea for help. Just as darkness edged into my vision, the room burst into chaos. Nurses shouted, security officers flooded in, strong arms pulling Caleb away from me. "Get him out of here!" someone shouted, their voice filled with urgency. I gasped for breath, sobbing uncontrollably as they dragged him backward. But before the security guards hauled him out into the hallway, Caleb's eyes found mine one last time. His voice was a sinister whisper, cutting through the chaos. "You'll regret this." Those 3 words lingered, sinking into my bones, embedding themselves deep within my soul. Even after he vanished, his threat echoed endlessly, sealing my fate, my resolve hardening in response. In that crushing moment, I knew the truth I'd tried to avoid for years. Caleb had never loved me. He had used me, deceived me, and now betrayed me utterly. But beneath the pain and betrayal, beneath the scars forming invisibly alongside those on my body, a new feeling began to take root, an intense, burning determination. Caleb had crossed a line he could never walk back from. And now, it was my turn. The moment Caleb raised his fists in that hospital room, something inside me snapped. I had spent years rationalizing his behavior, making excuses for the man who tore me down piece by piece. I had believed that if I was patient enough, if I tried harder, if I sacrificed more, he would return to being the man I once loved. But that moment, when his fists connected with my broken body, when I gasped for air as he spat venomous words at me, it was like a switch had been flipped. There was no fixing this. There was no more waiting, no more hoping, no more enduring. I had to get out. And for the first time, I wasn't just thinking about survival. I was thinking about justice. I didn't call Caleb after the attack. I didn't cry or beg or try to reason with him. Instead, I called Catherine, a highly regarded domestic violence attorney recommended by my parents. When she arrived at the hospital, she walked into my room like a force of nature. Sharp-eyed, crisp suit, and an air of quiet authority that made me feel like I wasn't alone in this fight. She pulled up a chair beside my bed and studied me carefully. "I know this is overwhelming, Janice," she said, her voice calm but firm. "But if you want to hold him accountable, we have to move fast. The longer we wait, the more time he has to twist the narrative." I swallowed hard. The thought of taking legal action against Caleb felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, preparing to jump. "He's not going to stop," I whispered. Catherine nodded. "No, he won't unless we make him." And that's when I knew I wasn't just fighting for myself. I was fighting for Olivia. For the years of fear, for every insult, every wound, every night I had lain awake wondering if I had done something to deserve this. Catherine wasted no time. She contacted the hospital administration and obtained statements from the nurse and security guard who had witnessed Caleb attacking me. Their testimonies were damning. Both had seen the look of pure rage on his face, the way he had lunged at me with clenched fists. She gathered photos of my injuries, documenting every bruise, every swollen joint, every painful reminder of what Caleb had done to me. She had me compile every financial record I could find, proof of his control over our accounts, his constant monitoring of my spending, the way he had cut me off from any financial independence. Piece by piece, we built a case, and for the first time, I felt something I hadn't in years: power. When Caleb realized I wasn't coming back, that I wasn't going to beg for forgiveness or plead for him to change, his fury boiled over. The phone calls started first. At first, he tried to play nice. "Janice, we need to talk. You're blowing this out of proportion." Then came the guilt trips. "You're ruining our family. Olivia needs both her parents. Do you really want to do this to her?" And finally, the threats. "If you think you can win this, you're wrong. You have nothing without me." But he was wrong, because this time, I wasn't afraid. I blocked his number when he started showing up outside my parents' house. I documented everything and handed it over to Catherine. She filed for a restraining order the next day. Caleb was losing control, and he knew it. The day of the trial, I walked into the courthouse with my head held high. Caleb was already there, sitting beside his lawyer. He didn't look at me at first, but when he finally did, it wasn't with the same arrogant confidence he used to have. He looked nervous. Good. Catherine started the case with cold, hard facts. She presented the security footage from the hospital, showing him entering my room, the way he towered over me the moment he lashed out in rage. She called the nurse and the security guard to the stand. Their words painted the reality of that night. How I had been lying in a hospital bed, defenseless, recovering from a near-fatal accident, when my own husband chose to attack me instead of supporting me. How Caleb had to be pulled away as he ranted that I had ruined his life. How my face had been frozen in fear when they arrived. Next, Catherine presented the medical records and photos of my injuries, the bruises, the fractures, the undeniable evidence that Caleb had been more than just angry. He had been violent. Caleb's lawyer tried to counter with excuses. This was just a moment of frustration. My client has been under a lot of stress. There is no history of prior physical abuse. That was the moment Catherine went for the no history, she repeated, her voice sharp. Let's talk about history. She pulled out bank statements, text messages, and old voicemails, evidence of years of manipulation, financial control, emotional abuse. She looked directly at Caleb. Tell me, Mr. Carter, if this was just a moment of frustration, then why did you prevent your wife from accessing money? Why did you control what she spent, how she dressed, who she spoke to? Caleb stiffened. That has everything to do with it, Catherine cut him off, because this wasn't just about one moment. This was a pattern, a long, well-documented pattern of control and cruelty. Caleb's face paled. The judge didn't need much convincing. It took less than an hour before the verdict was read. Caleb was guilty of assault, domestic violence, and coercive control. The gavel struck, and just like that, he was no longer the man who ruled my life. As I walked out of the courthouse, my parents by my side, I felt something I hadn't in a long, long time. Relief. For years, Caleb had dictated every part of my existence, what I wore, how I spoke, how much I was worth. But that day, he had no power over me. I was no longer his victim. I was free. And I wasn't just walking away from a courtroom. I was walking into the rest of my life. The first night in our new apartment, Olivia and I lay on the floor, wrapped in blankets, staring at the ceiling. There was no furniture yet, just a few boxes, a mattress pushed against the wall, and the soft hum of the city outside our window. It should have felt empty, but instead it felt free. For the first time in years, there was no tension in the air, no waiting for the sound of a car pulling into the driveway, no fear of misplaced words triggering a storm. Just peace. Olivia turned to me, her small fingers tracing patterns on the blanket. Mommy, are we safe now? I swallowed the lump in my throat and pulled her close. Yes, baby, I whispered. We're safe. And for the first time, I believed it. Moving out of that house, the house where I had spent years walking on eggshells, where every corner held memories of my silence and his rage, felt like shedding an old rotting skin. I didn't take much with me, just the essentials. The rest I left behind, the memories, the ghosts. I found a small apartment on the outskirts of town. It wasn't much, just 2 bedrooms, a tiny kitchen, and a balcony that overlooked a row of trees, but it was ours. Every morning I woke up without the weight of dread sitting on my chest. I no longer flinched at the sound of a door closing. I no longer braced myself for criticism over the way I cooked, dressed, or existed. I was learning to breathe again. I found a job working as an accountant for a small firm. It wasn't glamorous and the paychecks weren't huge, but it was mine, my own money, my own independence. But even as I rebuilt my life, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was still something left unfinished, a story waiting to be told. One evening, after Olivia had fallen asleep, I sat at my small kitchen table and stared at the laptop screen in front of me. A blank page, a blinking cursor. I took a deep breath and started typing. I wrote about Caleb, about the slow, insidious way he had erased me. I wrote about how love had turned into control, how kindness had twisted into manipulation. I wrote about fear, and then I wrote about the moment I chose to fight back, how I stood in that courtroom and faced the man who had tried to break me, how I won, and when I was done, I hit a record. Sitting in my dimly lit apartment, wearing nothing but an old sweatshirt and exhaustion, I spoke directly to the camera. "This is my story," I said, "and if you're watching this, maybe it's yours too." I never expected anyone to care. I thought maybe a handful of people would stumble across my video, maybe leave a comment or two. But within days, the views started climbing. Then the messages started pouring in, women from all over the world. "Janice, I thought I was alone. Thank you for sharing this, your story. I'd been too afraid to leave, but after watching this, I think I can." With every comment, every email, every whispered confession from strangers who had suffered in silence like I once had, I realized something. I was not alone. For years, I had believed that my pain was mine alone to carry, that no one would understand, that no one would care. But they did, and for the first time, I saw my survival as something more than just my own victory. It was a beacon for others. I started making more videos, not just about what I had been through, but about what I had learned, how to recognize the signs of emotional abuse, how to escape financial control, how to rebuild after leaving. Each story I shared brought more people to my channel. Each conversation reminded me why I had survived. With time, my audience grew. My words, once trapped inside my own head, once swallowed out of fear, became powerful. And then something I never expected happened. Brands started reaching out. Organizations wanted me to speak at events. And suddenly this thing I had created in my tiny apartment, this raw and honest retelling of my pain, became a source of income. Not Caleb's money, not a handout, mine. With that income, I didn't just survive, I thrived. I was able to move into a better apartment. I started saving for Olivia's future. For the first time in my life, I had control. One evening, as Olivia and I sat on the balcony eating ice cream, she turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "Mommy? Yeah, baby? Do you still miss Daddy?" The question caught me off guard. I stared at the city lights in the distance, feeling the cool night air against my skin. Did I miss Caleb? The man I had loved? The illusion of happiness we had once shared? I thought about it for a long moment, then shook my head. "No, sweetheart," I said. "I don't." She nodded, satisfied with the answer, and took another bite of her ice cream. I watched her, my beautiful, strong little girl. She would never have to grow up in a house where she felt afraid. She would never learn to equate love with control, because I had broken the cycle, because I had saved us. I used to believe that leaving Caleb would be the hardest thing I ever did, but the truth? The hardest thing was realizing I should have left sooner. I had spent years waiting for him to change, years believing his words instead of trusting my own pain. Now I know better. Now I knew that love wasn't supposed to feel like a cage. Now I knew that I was strong enough to survive on my own. I looked over at Olivia, laughing at something on her tablet, free of the weight that once loomed over our lives, and I smiled. Finally, I was exactly where I was meant to be. I used to think I couldn't live without Caleb, but the truth is I just needed to believe in myself. If you're stuck in a toxic relationship, remember, there's always a way out, and you deserve a better life. Have you ever been in a similar situation to me? If so, what would you do?